Welcome to the Achieve Results Now podcast, the podcast that gives you immediate actions you can take to start seeing life-shifting results now. Hey everybody, welcome to the Achieve Results Now podcast. This is Mark Cardone.
And Theron Feidt.
Excited today because we are carrying on our samurai principles. We've had a great run of these. We've had a lot of feedback, a lot of questions, a lot of things come up. And today we're focusing on our next principle, our next samurai principle, which is honor.
Yes, samurai honor. And there's a lot to this. It could be the overarching principle of all of them in a sense. But what we did is we broke down into three action steps that we think that are relevant for today.
And I think a lot of people, when they talk about honor, is such like an old word. Like I don't think people use the word honor or living an honorable life very often.
No, probably not.
I think to break it down, it's really just the concept of, aligning your actions with your moral principles, right? So we all have moral principles. Hopefully the people who are listening to this that are achievers, we have similar moral principles. We know right and wrong and things like that. But it's also, it means aligning your actions with those things. So we're actually acting on behalf. So, I mean, if you're the type of business owner who says, geez, community is really important to me, community is one of my principles, you have to make sure that you are acting in such a way that does that and not just doing it for financial gain, right? Which I think you see a lot in different organizations.
Sure.
If you're somebody who says, hey, one of my main principles is, raising positive kids, but then your actions speak differently than that, that's, so really getting those things to align, it's harder than a lot of people think it is.
Yeah, it sure is. And one of the key words as we're doing the research on this was courage. We saw that courage a lot. Yeah. And we've talked about courage. We've done podcasts on courage. I have a weekly wisdom for the dojo on courage. And in fact, I just did it, I think, a few weeks ago. And so that's going to come up as we're discussing the three action steps to have samurai honor. And you're right, it is kind of an old timey word or concept, I think, but it's probably missing more in today's culture than we want to admit. Think of somebody you want to do business with. Hopefully they have honor that they're going to do what they say they're going to, or you have a friend. Hopefully they honor you in your absence. If you have a friend that talks bad about you to other people, I'm gonna say that probably isn't a true friend.
Right.
But a friend that defends you in front of others when you're not around, as long as they're defending something that you did correctly, you didn't murder somebody and they're defending you. But I think that's a true friend. So I think those are, simple examples of honor.
Yeah. And one of the things that I think goes hand in hand with courage as we're getting into these action steps, is confidence. And I think confidence is so important. And one of the hard things with confidence is none of us have it when we start.
Right.
We build it by doing those kind of small, difficult things, right? Which takes courage to do. And I think, living a life with honor really does take, having a degree of confidence because using that example, if there's someone, who's, talks really nice about you when you're there, but not great about you when you're not, a lot of times that's because they're not confident because they're worried about, what will this other person think depending on what I say and things like that. Right.
Yeah. And I think, I think what you said was so important, it really was. And, I think the whole courage and honor and all of that it's a practice, just like all of these. I mean, we talked about the same thing is we need to practice this and we're going to fall short. But like you said, the building, confidence, you can fake confidence when you're doing something for the first time. And I think that is appropriate to do.
Yep.
If I'm giving a speech and I've never given this speech before and I've never given this speech in front of other people before, I need to act and look confident and sound confident as I'm doing it. But what happens is as I'm going through it, I'm feeling more and more confident. I'm feeling better about it. And then that reinforces, hey, I do know what I'm doing and I do know what I'm talking about. But it's the small steps, the small little acts of courage that really help build that.
Yeah, and I think that's one of the good things about honor and our action steps that we have today.
Mm-hmm.
Is we really did break it down into stuff that you can put into day-to-day practice. So let's get into the first one.
Yeah.
The first one I really like, and we've talked about this on other podcasts, and I think it keeps coming up. It's one of those things like gratitude where
Right.
it bubbles to the top so often,
Yeah,
and
it does.
it's honor your commitments.
Right.
Your word is your bond, right?
Mm-hmm.
So when you say you're going to do something, just do it.
Right. Yeah, I know I've had friends in the past, and certainly when I was younger, that were really good at saying, "Oh yeah, we're going to do this, we're going to do that," and they get you all hyped up, and they're like, "Man, you feel so good when you're around them," and then nothing. They dropped the ball. They didn't even come close to say, they're people pleasers basically, and they know how to talk, and they know how to really be send that emotion to somebody, and then there's no action behind it. You know exactly what I'm talking about. You
one
probably
of the
know the
great
same people, right?
one of the greatest things, somebody used to do this, and I adopted it. But when you run into those random people and they go, "Oh yeah, we should get together someday,"
Yeah,
they
yeah,
would go, "Oh yeah, when's good?" And then you immediately knew, like, the conversation
yep,
started to go, "Oh, I got to look at my calendar and my kids and my
yeah,
stuff," and the excuses
yeah,
start to come out. But
uh-huh,
you know so I mean, I think part of this is learning not to say you're going to do things
right,
that you have no intention of doing, finding,
right,
because I think we use that as filler.
yes,
We use that as
yep,
whatever. But just making sure that when you make those commitments, you're sticking to them. And you and I were joking around before we started recording, but people who forget to do things, like people who, like, oh, it just slipped my mind.
yep, yep,
There's no excuse in
no,
2024 or 2025 or whenever you're listening to this. Like, it's only going to get easier to remember stuff going forward
right,
from here with the amount of technology and tools
yeah,
and reminders. If you're not writing it down, like if you say you're going to do something, whether it's your goals, whether it's a commitment to somebody else, and you're not writing it down so you remember it, I don't, do you really even care about it?
yeah. I'm old enough to remember when Post-it notes or sticky notes, whatever you want to
Hmm.
call them. I think the first brand was Post-it,
Yeah.
right? And that was this new thing, this little note thing that you could just post on the wall or wherever, and it would pull off, and you wouldn't leave a mark. And those were great reminders. That was before even cell phones, but certainly before anything electronic that you could write it down. And I remember those were good reminders. And I know my mom used them a lot. I used them as well. But like you said, now, I mean, just about everybody has a smartphone. And whatever operating system you use, they're the same with the sense that you can put it in your calendar. You can set reminders. The reminders will pop up. You can set several reminders, so you can remind yourself the day before, 2 hours before, 5 minutes before, whatever. And just like we talked about, and like you said, we joked earlier, how can you forget anything unless, and this is what we discover, that you don't have a system of putting your phone right away when the reminder comes up, um, or you're just, I don't know, you're doing something else
Yeah.
because you shouldn't forget things anymore.
Yeah, I think people just, they either don't have a system or they forget to work it,
Right.
and because
Yeah.
listen, we've all have, especially being in sales, and people who are listening to this who are in sales will understand this, but you set up your CRM and you have all the people, in your
Yeah.
database that you're going to contact.
Right.
And of course we have days when, oh, I was sick that day, so I missed it, right? And I
Yeah.
didn't work my
Sure.
system, and then I'm behind. But I think, really it's write it down, figure out how you're going to remember to follow up on it, whether that's
Yeah.
reminders in your phone or calendar
Right.
or whatever,
Right.
and just keep to those commitments. And when you can't keep to those commitments, you just have honest conversations with people. Hey, I dropped the ball. I
Yeah.
apologize, and here's what I'm going to do to pick it up going forward.
And I think that's huge what you just said there, because of course, I'm being a little hyperbolic that you should never forget anything, because it is going to happen. You're gonna uh, you were talking to somebody and you had to leave real quick. You're in your car, you're taking off, and you didn't write it down. And then let's say you have a 20-minute drive. By the end of the 20-minute drive, a million things went through your head, and then you forgot to write it down. That does happen. So I'm not saying it's
Yeah.
never going to happen. What I'm saying is, if you have a habit of doing it all the time, it's your bad habit that's holding you back. certainly not the technology, and the other thing is, it's not just the big things, it's the small things. And I would argue that the small things, the small commitments, the small reminders, the small things to honor your commitments is what's going to build to the bigger things. If I have an employee that I ask them to do something and I have to remind them a second, a third, a fourth time, I'm probably not going to ask that person to do anything anymore. Because some people might, hopefully nobody on this podcast, but some people will think, oh, great, perfect. Is that all I have to do is not follow through on things and my boss will never ask me to do anything? Yes. But also, guess who's going to be the first one to go when there's cuts?
Yeah.
You. So.
No, and I think talking about habits, which I think is good. I think it's like, let's get into the second one because I want to.
Sure.
I think this is really, really powerful.
Yeah.
And it's keeping your principles in your small everyday decisions, right?
Yeah.
So we talked about aligning your actions with your principles. This is really what it is it's keeping those principles in the forefront. So as we're going through our day, whether it's at work, at home, in our quiet time by ourselves, am I acting, in line with my principles? James Clear in Atomic Habits,
right?
Paraphrasing the quote, but he says every action we take is a vote for the type of person we want to be, in the future.
Yeah.
And I think this is one of the greatest ways to build honor and character is by keeping those principles in the forefront.
Yeah, and this is, we're not trying to get preachy when we're saying stand up for what's right, but if you focus on principles instead of opinions, you're going to be ahead of the game, so that way when there's something you disagree with, and whatever it is, but it's, well, they're probably right, even though I don't like that person or I disagree with that person. If you have principles, you're going to be, you still might not like it, but you're going to be like, okay, that makes sense. They're right in that, and that's where the principles come in. We have the 6 principles of black belt that we use, and there's certainly more than that, but we talk about the six principles. And right now we're in the series of the samurai principles, and there's 7 of those. All of these are great reminders, and they're just exercise. They have to kind of remind yourself every day. But number 2 is standing up for what's right. The obvious ones, somebody's getting bullied. There's somebody in danger. There's a kid in danger. Sometimes you got to be careful not getting involved with certain things. But certainly, if there's somebody that needs your help, I would hope you would help them. That's the big things. But even the small things, the interactions with people that you disagree with, I think that's where you can really practice it on a day-to-day basis.
Yeah, I think you definitely can, because I think it's important to not, sway from your principles just because it's unpopular, just because, you're in a room with a couple people who disagree with you. Like, listen, if you have a strong, firm belief, it's totally okay, for you to, stand up for that belief respectfully to other people. But I think, keeping those principles in the forefront is one of the best things you can do because, we say the 6 principles of black belt every time we go to class, right? And there's a reason we do that, right? It's not just because we need filler to do at the end of class. It's because we want those things, those principles of modesty, courtesy, integrity, and ingrained in our being and what we do. So I think that's important.
Yeah, and then just to expand on that a little bit. We want to build a culture that we like to have.
Yeah.
We like to be around. We're building our own little world in the dojo, and what better place for a kid to grow up than at the dojo? I don't know. Yeah. I don't know if there is any. We've been doing this a long time. I'm on my 43rd year of doing this, and I've seen a lot of kids, and then they're adults and they have kids of their own. And I see, and certainly the dojo wasn't the only thing, but I certainly believe it was a big influence on them. I know it was in your life. I know it has been in my life, and even with adults. Like you said, the reminders that we need as adults, modesty, courtesy. Yeah, I need to work on the courtesy part, of the principles. I wasn't very courteous yesterday, so today I'm going to work on being more courteous. How can that be bad? All of that's going to only make the world better, and so that's why principles are good. Now, number 3, unless you had something more on number 2.
No, go ahead.
So number 3, you kind of alluded to that, kind of bled into it. But number 3 is respecting others, even if you disagree. And this is, I think, probably not shown very well nowadays, and especially as we're going in America. We're coming up on a presidential election. There's a lot of people we might disagree with, and they're, polar opposites of things. But can we still be nice, especially to our friends?
Yeah.
I think so, And can we agree to disagree? I think so. And I don't think that's being wimpy. I just think it's being polite.
Yeah.
And if you really aren't going to change their mind, why dig it up? That's my thing.
Yeah, I really like the martial arts and example of when we step into the ring, whether it's boxing, whether it's martial arts, MMA, kickboxing. If you ever watch a fight right on TV, what's the first thing the fighters do?
Yeah, they tap gloves,
they bow, right,
or something else.
And if you see these people outside of the ring, most of them, unless they're on TV and they're doing the bravado thing, which okay, that's part of it, but most of them get along. Most of them understand, like we're arguing about this one thing in the ring, but we respect each other nonetheless, right? Because we have years of experience, years of training, years of all the things. And I think it's important to have that same thing in personal interactions where you can say, listen, it's not, 30 years of fight training, but you have, 30 to 40 years of a certain upbringing and lifestyle behind you that has created the opinions and the values that you have, right? So I respect that, I'm not going to come in with my different set and immediately like change 30, 40 years of your stuff. And that's not my goal, but I think you're right. The fact that we can respectfully disagree on things, which I mean, you and I disagree on things sometimes, but it doesn't change our relationship, doesn't change our friendship. And I think some of the best friends don't agree on everything, because if you do, you're not getting that value from the friendship.
Well, I mean, it's silly to say, I agree with this person on everything. It's like, do you agree with your parents on all their views?
No.
I don't know if I've ever met a child that has that. I know I don't. I don't know if I've ever met a person that said, oh, yeah, I'm 100%. I mean, I'm sure there are some out there, but I mean, most thinking people are going to have their own opinion. And maybe you're 80% or 90% agreement with your family members, or maybe you're only 10% from certain family members. And that's fine. But I think the idea of being respectful, the idea of saying, okay, I tell me why you feel that way, Mark, and then we're talking about it. And it doesn't mean we have to make a decision of who's right or who's wrong. It's not a win, lose, or lose, win. It shouldn't be anyways. It should be, all right, I'll take that in consideration. And then oftentimes, anytime I've ever done that with anybody, whether it's you or somebody else that I disagree with, and I let it sit for a little while, I may not agree with 100% what they said, but maybe 10 or 15 or 25 or even half of what they said, I'm like, yeah, I think they're right, because they have a different perspective than you. Everybody has a different perspective of how they grew up, what their experiences were throughout the day, who they deal with on a regular basis. So their view and their point of view can be valuable to you. Yeah. Not 100% of their views, but certain parts of their views can be. And why not learn from that? Why not have an open mind? And that doesn't mean you're changing your values, but I hope you're not the same person you were 5 years ago or 10 years ago. I hope your principles, if they're strong, are the same, but I hope you have grown as a person, right? I know you have.
100%.
And I have.
I think that's a great point. I think, going back to How to Win Friends and Influence People, greatest book of all time, one of. Yeah. If you haven't read it, make sure you get a copy.
Yep.
But Dale Carnegie, he used to say you can't win an argument. And I think that's right. I heard somebody on a podcast talking about, basically like an argument is a knot. And when you have two people on both sides, if all they're doing is pulling, they're just making the knot tighter and more bunched up.
That's a good analogy, yeah.
But if you and I sit down and we're working on unraveling the knot together, right, it helps us get to a solution. So I just think that's a really good analogy where there's no need to pull in separate directions. We can just sit there and have a conversation, and you just can't win an argument. Even if you win, the other person's gonna be ticked off and angry at you. So.
Yep.
So I think, having that respect for other people, even when you disagree, I respect for everybody, but even when you disagree, is important.
So hopefully we helped you focus on what we're talking about with honor in the modern day. Okay. So let's review. So step one was honor your commitments. And this is a simple task, but isn't easy to do. But it really is, whether it's big or small, do what you say you're going to do. Follow through and have great follow through.
Yeah, 100%. Number two, focus on your principles in your everyday decisions. So keep those principles in the forefront. Stand up for the principles that you know are right, but keep them top of mind so you can keep practicing them.
And number three is respecting others, especially when you disagree. Try to be as respectful as you can by still standing up for your principles. But I think ending with nobody ever wins an argument. I think that kind of sums up number three very well.
Absolutely. And that wraps up this episode of the Achieve Results Now podcast on Samurai Honor. Please share this with somebody who would benefit from it, and we will see you on the next episode.
Thank you.
Thanks for listening. Hop over to our website at www.achieveresultsnow.com to get your free copy of our book, Ignite Results, 4 specific daily actions to help you achieve results now. You can find us on Facebook at facebook.com/Achieve Results Now. Thanks for listening, commenting, and subscribing. Now get out there and achieve results now.